Hey there, last time I talked about how Bitcoin and the broader cryptocurrency movement are a much bigger threat to the United States than China could ever be. Today, I want to dive into the worldview behind this movement. Crypto advocates like to claim that they're revolutionary and they have a whole bunch of new thinking. But in truth, the ideology behind them has been running the world for like 40 years now. And it's a really tired ideology that a lot of people are beginning to think we are outgrowing. Well, we're not going to outgrow it if crypto advocates have anything to say about it. Cryptocurrency is Ronald Reagan's revenge. Ideology is important. As I mentioned last time, I am appalled that U.S. governmental and financial elites now seem to be more interested in buying into the crypto craze than trying to regulate it. Elites are buying into an ideology and technology that is openly promising to overthrow them. None of this would have been possible without Ronald Reagan, a man who served as U.S. president between 1981 and 1989 and who shaped and subsequently came to symbolize the changes that made the world economy of the past 40 years. I talked at length about Reagan's importance in a video I produced last year. The U.S. has indisputably been the most powerful country in the world for 75 years now. This period can be divided into two eras, the era of FDR and the era of Reagan. This is obviously an absurd oversimplification. Nobody responsible would make things out to be this straightforward, etc., but I do think many historians would agree with the broad strokes I'm laying out here. The era of FDR lasted about 48 years, and the era of Reagan has lasted 40. Measuring history according to presidential terms is a dumb oversimplification as well, but it works surprisingly well in this very big picture case. FDR came to power during the Great Depression, at a time when capitalism was seen by many as having failed. FDR saved capitalism from communism and fascism by massively increasing government involvement. The balance he created between the public and private sectors has been characterized as managerial capitalism, focused on mass production and government fine-tuning of the relationship between capital and labor. During this period, government produced marvels like interstate highways and the trip to the moon. The experts, public and private, were creating an affluent society, and we were all supposed to do our part and enjoy it. Reagan defined himself in opposition to all that. He wanted free trade and free markets. Reagan heralded the return of the entrepreneur and the mass disruption of big government and even some big businesses. Capital had to be free, and government had to get out of the way of the job creators. Creative destruction was the order of the day, and things like labor unions and national borders were inconvenient obstacles to be crushed. In that video last year, I emphasized how silly it is to talk about either of these systems as if they are good or evil. Each of those systems worked really well for a period of time, and each of them failed spectacularly. What more and more people have concluded since 2008, and what I decided for myself after Donald Trump's election in 2016, is that Ronald Reagan's era has run out of steam just as conclusively as FDR's era ran out of steam in the 1970s. What we don't know is what's next. In the years since I made that video, events seem to have closed the door on Reagan's era even more conclusively. COVID and Trump and Biden's absurdly generous government response seem to have convinced our governing and, more importantly, our financial and business elites that the old-school approach is dead. In 2009, fears about inflation prompted Obama to take a very limited, austerity-first approach to financial recovery. Trump, even before COVID, threw this idea out entirely, and, well, the results were great. The economy improved, and we have not seen significant inflation by any traditional metrics. In recent weeks, we've seen many assets that people imagine to show the real hyperinflation plummet in price, like lumber or crypto, or at least stop growing as quickly, like the price of used cars. Much like Reagan, who came up with an overarching ideology to justify choices that Carter was already making, Biden is now talking about government and its role in ways that we haven't really seen since LBJ. Trump broke the mold. Now Biden is trying to come up with something else that replaces it. I don't think Biden will be the one who pulls it off, but honestly, anything's possible. We're in a real state of flux right now. Recent months have seen a flurry of long reads that attempt to explain and justify what's happening. The New Republic's take on the career of the Reagan-inspiring economist Milton Friedman probably oversimplifies things a bit too much, but it provides an interesting summing up of the rise and fall of Reaganite economic thinking. The most striking example of that fall may be the bipartisan confirmation of Lina Khan to the Federal Trade Commission on June 15th. Trump's judges will stand in the way of this legal scholar's mission to break up big tech, but it is tremendously significant that 21 Republican senators joined 46 Democrats in endorsing this stridently pro-government power vision. The death of competition law was one of the most significant aspects of the Reagan era, and its promised resurrection is a really big deal. Everybody seems to agree that the Reagan era is dead and buried, and we're about to march up into the sunlit Keynesian uplands of economic justice for all and permanent government-guaranteed prosperity. Well, nobody told the crypto market this happy story. Crypto advocates may see themselves as revolutionary, but their Karl Marx is Milton Friedman, and Ronald Reagan might as well be their Che Guevara. Crypto is all about cutting out the government. Bitcoin isn't private, though some other currencies like Monero are, which sounds potentially very illegal. What Bitcoin is supposedly uncensorable. The record of transactions is public and distributed. Supposedly, there's no way for government to get into this. That is the liberatory promise of Bitcoin. Now, there are many ways that this promise breaks down in practice that I may get into in the next video, but crypto's libertarian promise is fundamentally very Reaganite. What we have here is a stridently anti-government subculture that is bubbling up at the exact moment that both political parties have rediscovered government. And the most infuriating thing is that most of the problems that crypto promises to solve, but won't, were generated by the winner-take-all nature of the Reagan era. It's now fashionable to condemn everything about the past 40 years, and that's profoundly wrong. In 1980, the US desperately needed some entrepreneurial vigor. We had lost tech leadership to Japan and Germany. We looked a lot like Europe does today, stagnant, with multiple actors fighting over a diminishing pool of post-war prosperity and power. Tech guru Paul Graham has pointed out that in 1980, almost all of the richest Americans had inherited their wealth. Many of these fortunes were families just coasting on the fumes of the industrialization that had happened a century ago. Today, many of the richest Americans made their billions in their lifetimes clawing back tech and financial leadership for the United States. This was a tremendous accomplishment. If we are now able to craft a more just settlement for the majority of Americans, we'll be able to do it because of the pools of wealth that the Reagan era created. But what the Reagan era lacked was the ability to help the majority of Americans. Its emphasis on the market overall tragically failed like 80% of the population. Yeah, cell phones are nice, but education, healthcare, and housing have all been given over to Wall Street with disastrous results. The ability to stream any TV show you want from your trailer park is not most people's idea of the American dream. What's more, outside of the top 20%, the Reagan era's economic record has honestly been kinda crappy. The supposedly so lame and boring FDR era put up significantly better economic growth figures in the aggregate. There's probably an ideal level of income inequality. You may need some to inspire people to excel. But wherever that ideal point is, we are way beyond it now. At a certain level of income inequality, you begin to reach diminishing returns. All that money put into private islands and private space flights is a lot less valuable to the economy than it would be if it was spread out more equally, being spent on the production of goods and services that can drive mass employment and make the whole economy richer. We need some level of Reaganite vigor in our economy, but if you let it run rampant, we all lose, which has been the case since at least 2008. The system absolutely has failed the majority of Americans. It makes sense to hate on the system that has produced this mess, and I can see why cryptocurrency's anti-establishment argument has such a broad appeal. But cryptocurrency will fail because it's not a new idea. It's just a more virulent version of the ideology that created the mess in the first place. For 40 years, all our prominent political actors have been shouting that government is a stupid mess that is only capable of blocking things through regulation. That actually wasn't what government looked like in 1980, but after 40 years of signing it over to the private sector, as Reagan suggested, a lot of government has become a stupid, corrupt, embarrassing mess. More Reagan is not the answer. Crypto claims to be against everything. Against government and against the Wall Street that has used government to screw us all over so royally. But as any honest crypto holder will admit, that's not how it's working in practice. Wall Street has already worked its way into the crypto movement. And no matter how anti-establishment a crypto holder claims to be, the vast majority are in favor of Wall Street getting into this, because they know that they need Wall Street to access the boring and more risk-averse trillions of dollars of the broader investing public. So what crypto offers is not an alternative to the winner-take-all Reagan era, it's an acceleration of it. There's no question that crypto creates a new class of winners, but it does it in the worst way possible. The Reagan era has seen a dramatic escalation of the importance of finance. Outside of the internet, we have seen a great technological stagnation. One explanation for this is the fact that since the 1980s, all our best and brightest have been going into finance instead of hard science. Winning became about using spreadsheets to screw around with the point system rather than coming up with anything truly new. Silicon Valley used to be the great exception. Now that tech has fallen into cryptomania, it's becoming just another branch of the finance industry. What a tremendous waste of talent. I have come to view crypto as just another runaway process of Reaganite dissolution, part religion, part anarcho-capitalist conspiracy theory. And the craziest thing about it is that it seems to be working. Crypto has minted a whole new class of millionaires and billionaires that are beginning to make their influence felt. I don't expect them to change the direction of this country. I expect them to accelerate us in the direction we've already been going. I think their political activism is most likely going to end up strangling efforts to build a more economically just country. If you thought the Koch brother libertarianism had a big effect on our politics, just wait until you see what the crypto libertarians get up to. Bitcoin is Ronald Reagan's revenge. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and click here to sign up for my email newsletter, which I'm trying to get out a little more often. Thanks.